Hi there. I hope you're all doing great. So great to see you again. And today we're going to talk about a book. So this is a book review session. And the book that we are going to talk about is a very, very popular book. But more than popular, I look at it as a very inspirational text. We're going to talk about 12 Rules for Life, written by Jordan Peterson. So what is this book about? Whether you should read it, you should not read it. We will try and find answers to all those questions. So first things first, let's understand a bit more about the author. So Jordan Peterson, of course, a very, very popular thought leader. He hails from Canada, but he has done some remarkable work all across, an academic by profession, a clinical psychologist, and he was also a former professor at the Harvard University. Currently, he's a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, and he has got more than 100 scientific papers to his credit. Now, if you are not aware about what scientific papers are, these are research papers, papers which talk about work that you have done, analysis of things that you have done, and then you distill all of that and put it in the form of a research paper or a scientific paper for the world to see. So he has the credit of having more than hundreds of these papers to his name, and his former popular book was called Maps of Meaning. So this is not the first book that he's written. He has in fact written several other books after the 12 Rules for Life as well. So let's understand more about what this book is all about. So this book first published in the year 2018. The genre is nonfiction, okay? And therefore you will find a lot of things which are practical, realistic. There are no artificial things here. And that is something which I find really interesting. Okay, and how big is this book? So let me warn you to begin with. Slightly bigger. It's about 368 pages. So it's not a book that you can just breeze through. It will need some time for you to read it, understand it, absorb it, and of course to apply it. So the book focuses on how do we enhance our own self. Now, when I say enhance, we're not talking about bodybuilding or just a physiological change. We're talking about the change in our personality, the way we think, the way we have perspective in life. So that is something which is the deepest and the most interesting part about this book, is that it talks about enhancing your own self as an individual, as a person, or even as a professional. This book was published initially by Random House Canada. So that's in a nutshell about what this book is all about. Let's understand about what are these 12 rules which this book so vocally talks about. So I'm going to talk about all the 12 rules here, and I think the 12 rules in itself are the key takeaways from this book. So let's understand one takeaway at a time. So the first takeaway of this book is called Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back. Now, what this means is it's important that you have a good posture, of course, at a very, very basic level. But it also talks about the fact that you stand with a sense of purpose and confidence. Now, a lot of times when people put forth their personalities in situations and scenarios, they come across as being weak, as timid. What the author says is that weakness and timidity will never be respected. You got to stand for what you believe in. You got to stand for your ideas, your perspectives, without trying to overpower or dominate other people, but you got to believe in your own self. And that is where he says you got to stand up straight with your shoulders back, which means you showcase, you demonstrate confidence in anything and everything that you do. So timidity and weakness is not going to work for you. It's about showcasing courage and strength. So important that you live for those values, you believe in them. The second thing that he talks about, which is rule number 2 in the book, is treat yourself like you're someone you are responsible for helping. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that you believe that you can help someone else, which means you can help yourself, right? Now, in a very, very simplistic manner is the fact that when you believe that you can help others, you also get the confidence that if I can help others, I can surely help myself. So the author basically talks about the fact, Mr. Jordan Peterson says that if you believe that you take responsibility for helping yourself, there is a lot that you can do for yourself, which also means that you'll never play the victim card. A lot of people, especially when they're going through tragedies, when they're going through a tough time, tend to look down upon themselves. They believe of themselves as a victim. And when you start believing of yourself as a victim, there is not much you can do for yourself. Whereas when you take complete responsibility for helping yourself, just like a friend would help you, when you become your own friend and you take that responsibility of helping yourself, then you can perhaps make a lot of changes, a positive change in your life. And that is what it is all about at the end of the day, is that you treat yourself like someone you're responsible to help. So you take complete responsibility and accountability of shaping your life, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how tough a situation that you're going through, but you say that, you know what, I can help myself. And that is a beautiful thought that has been advocated by the author in this case. Rule number 3, talk about make friends with people who want the best for you. Now, this is age-old wisdom, but I think very nicely put up by the author here. In a very simple sense, it means that you need to be surrounded with people who want the very best for you, who will challenge you at an intellectual level, who will challenge you when you're going wrong, who will ask you uncomfortable questions. But all of this is being done with an intent, with a purpose, with a deep desire to help you. And that is why the kind of friends that you choose makes a huge difference in your life. So look back at yourself, maybe at your workplace or in your personal life. Do you have people who can guide you, who can mentor you, who can give you the bad news when you desperately need to have the bad news? So having people in your life who want the best for you, who challenge you at every level is a transformation thing that you can do for yourself. And that is something which Jordan Peterson talks about very, very passionately. He says that you've got to surround yourself with people who want the very best for you. Now, is that always comfortable for you to digest? Not really, but that is something which smart people would do, is that they would have other people in their life who are comparatively better in something or the other, and you can lean upon them when you need help or advice from them in some way or the other. So that's rule number 3. Rule number 4, and this was perhaps my favorite rule out of all the 12 rules that you have here, is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. Now, let me simplify that for you. The world around us constantly compares us, right? And that's what a lot of people love to do. They love to compare your progress academically, financially, health-wise, looks-wise, every which ways. Now, that's what the world will do, because that's what the world is supposed to do. What are you supposed to do? Well, you're not supposed to compare yourself with other people. Unfortunately, every time you open a social media page like Facebook or LinkedIn, it's very obvious for us to start comparing, right? We look at other people and we feel that they're more happier, more richer, more financially secure than we are. Or perhaps they are having a dream job and maybe I'm unemployed at this point in time. So whatever it might be. So it's a constant nagging, constant comparison that we tend to do with other people. And at the end of the day, we only feel bad about ourselves. So kicks in the victim mentality. We feel that we have not done enough, or perhaps we got to hustle it out, things like that. Well, sometimes it's inspiring, but in most cases, it's depressing. And that's why you see a lot of people who spend, and I'm not saying this through my own words, but research says that people who spend a lot of time on social media are likely to face negative thoughts because of these constant comparisons. So Jordan Peterson says, if you have to compare and if you want to compare, then it is better to compare your own version of who you are today with who you were yesterday. And I think that's a wonderful thought. It's a practical thought. It basically means that you are capable of looking at your own self, maybe a year down the line or a couple of years in the past, and say, where am I today? So maybe when I started working, I was earning just 20,000 per month. Today, I'm earning, let's say, 50,000 per month. What is the positive out of this, in terms of finance, in terms of investments that I'm doing? Similarly, when it comes to health, I was weighing, let's say, 70 kgs, and today I'm 65 or 66. So that's a far better way of comparing in your life, rather than saying that, oh, look at his body and physique. He's got an amazing physique and I don't look fit. Because that's only going to add to your problems and it's going to make you feel bad about yourself. Why the hell do you want to do that? So I think the author is bang on when he says you have to compare yourself with who you were yesterday to who you are today, rather than comparing yourself to someone else, which is an effort in futility. So that's rule number 4. Rule number 5. Now, this is more for those who are in the position of a parent. Okay, so if you're a parent, then you would be able to correlate, resonate more with this particular rule. But even if you're not a parent, look at it as being a leader, where a leader has to take care of the people within the team. So it is still going to be applicable in that context. So what is this rule about? This rule says, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that if you're a parent and you have kids, then your kids sometimes will do things which are not great. For example, they will be indisciplined, they will shout, they will throw tantrums, they will do certain things at that age to get attention of people around them. Now, the moment you see something of that nature, it is important to step up in your responsibility as a parent and stop your kids from doing something which is societally, morally, ethically undesirable. Now, why do you do that? Because if you don't do it, then those kids, when they move around in the society, whereas it is school or college or the workplace, they will throw tantrums there as well. They will do things which are undesirable for other people. And that is why the responsibility of the parent is manifold. It is to ensure that you not only provide for the basic necessities to your children, but at the same time, you also ensure that they become responsible and respected individuals. And how do you do that? Is to inculcate a sense of discipline in them right from day one. And that is something which the author thoroughly and very strongly advocates, is that it is your responsibility as a parent to ensure that you stop your kids from doing anything that you find undesirable, because that is also going to be found as undesirable by a lot of other people in the world outside. So that's more about parenting, but I think it's applicable as a leader as well. You stop your subordinates, your team members from doing something which is undesirable in the corporate world or at the corporate workplace, because that will not fetch them respect. Instead, people will despise them. So that's something which we all need to cater to. Rule number 6, and this is again a beautiful rule. It says, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. How true is that? Now, all of us like to complain. I complain all the time, and I think it's only human to do that. But along with complaining, it's important that you complain with making sure that you have the right to complain, which means get your own house in order before you talk about the garbage on the street. So do things which you believe the world needs to do, and only then will you have some reason to complain or to shout out and tell other people to do things which are correct. So before you lecture others, it's important to look into your own heart and ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? So if your own house is dirty, you have no right to complain about how dirty the city or the country or the world is, because you yourself are not disciplined enough to take care of the basic responsibility. So before you lecture others, it's important to demonstrate good things through your own actions. And I think that is bang on target. We all must take inspiration from this particular rule. Rule number 7. And this talks about pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Expedient basically means urgent. So this actually, when I read this rule, when I was reading the pages of this particular chapter, it reminded me of one of the most foremost or one of the most celebrated management thinkers, Dr. Stephen Covey, who focused a lot on prioritizing and time management. And he wrote a book called First Things First. And I had some nostalgia when I was reading this particular rule, because this rule correlates to that. It talks about doing things which are meaningful, not just about doing things which are there on your to-do list right now. So most of us get caught in doing urgent things because we haven't planned for it in advance. But I think what the author tries to say here is that you got to look at things which are more meaningful, which is going to add value to your time and your effort. How many of us do that? Let me admit, not many times have I found myself doing things which are value-oriented, because we get caught up in the frenzy. So someone else basically dictates our to-do list, isn't it? And I'm sure you would have faced that too. But it's important to bring yourself back on track and ask yourself that, am I doing something worthwhile? Am I doing something which is going to add value to me, to people around me, and to other people who are associated with me? I think that realization is extremely important in the context of managing your time and managing your life in general very, very closely. So pursue what is truly meaningful to you. Something that is going to take you to the next level of excellence is absolutely quintessential. Rule number 8, tell the truth or at least don't lie. Now, what does that mean? Easier said than done. But the fact is, the author says that you got to say what needs to be said. Very difficult to practice, especially if you are someone who has often been practicing getting along with things in a manner that are convenient at that moment of time. But you got to speak your heart out. Now, the author does not say that you got to be ruthless when you say the truth, but the fact is you got to say things which are necessary to be said, which also means that sometimes you will have to say things not because it is popular, but because it is necessary. A lot of times we do things and say things which will make us feel uh, lovable or popular. But that's not going to take us a long way because it means that you do not have any credibility. Therefore, you got to speak the truth. Or if you can't speak the truth, at least don't lie, which means that if you don't have complete information, say that I don't know. I'm sorry, I do not have complete knowledge about this. Let me do my research and come back to you. So that's the bare minimum that you can do. But as far as possible, whether it's the workplace or your family, try to be as straightforward as possible. Of course, be cognizant and be sensitive to the feelings of people around you. Sometimes when you say the truth, not everyone can digest it, but that should not stop you from saying what you need to say, because a lot of times we tend to sugarcoat our words, especially in the corporate world, because we believe that when we speak the truth, the harsh truth, people may dislike us. But that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. You got to take that risk. You got to tell people that, look, what I'm saying or what I'm going to say, you may not like it, but nonetheless, I need to say that because I believe this will be the best thing for us to do. Okay, so it's important that you say what you need to say in a sensitive manner, yet you speak your heart out. So that's rule number 8, tell the truth. Rule number 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Now, how many of you are good listeners or great listeners? Well, I would say I'm a decent listener, not a bad one, but I'm still trying my best to be a great listener. And if you look at a lot of communicators around the world, they are fabulous listeners. They listen to the other person with a sense of purpose, with a sense of curiosity. That is something which is difficult to do on a consistent basis. And that's precisely what Jordan Peterson talks about in rule number 9, is that when you're talking to someone, the moment you have this assumption that the other person is going to add value to what I'm listening to, then the way you look at the other person shifts dramatically because you respect what the other person is telling you. You assume that he or she knows more on this topic rather than I do. Or maybe he or she knows something different, which I have never thought about. So the whole idea here is to listen with an intent, listen with a purpose, and to make sure that you respect what the other person is telling you. Now, even in the corporate world, many a times when we are listening to other people, we stop listening for some of these reasons. Maybe he or she is a junior, he or she doesn't have enough experience, or he or she is someone whom I don't like. All of these are reasons which stop us from listening to things. But rather than that, if we can just shift our focus and say that he or she may tell me something which I'm not aware about, then I'm going to respect what the other individual is telling me. You might still disagree, which is okay, but you'll still listen with a lot of intent and respect. And that is what rule number 9 talks about. Rule number 10, be precise in your speech. Now, I've been talking continuously for the last few minutes, but that is something which is not appreciated by people in general. Unfortunately, and I say this word with a lot of respect, unfortunately, a lot of times in schools, we have something called as elocution competition, which challenges kids to talk for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And unfortunately, we continue with that legacy even when we start working or run our own businesses or even in our personal relationships, is that we believe that I'm going to speak and the world has to listen to what I'm telling them. But if you want the world to listen to you, you got to be precise. You got to be able to distill your thoughts in few words, concise them, and say what you want to say without beating around the bush. A lot of times when we are in conversations, both in person and in corporate life, it happens so that when we're talking to people, they keep talking, and then we wonder and we say, okay, what are you trying to tell me? Have you had moments like this? I have these moments all the time where I'm simply confused with what the other person is trying to tell us. because he or she is beating around the bush. It's important that you're precise. You say what you want to say in the minimum words possible. And I think that is a skill which one needs to add. If you look at people who are, who are part of the top management team, they're very good at being precise. They say things the way they want to say it in the least possible words without mincing anything. And that is an ability, that is a capability that we all must try and incorporate. Because when we're talking to people, if we can't be precise, guess what? We lose our audience. So practice that as much as possible in your conversations. Rule number 11. Again, this one talks about parenting in some sense, but you can also look at it as being a leader. So rule number 11 talks about do not bother children while they are skateboarding. Now, when I read this, I said, what is skateboarding and children got to do here? But this rule, in a generic sense, it talks about the fact that when you see kids skateboarding, it has got a sense of risk attached with it. Skateboarding is not easy, right? So kids are likely to fall down, they're likely to fracture themselves. That's why you see in the picture as well, a kid is completely safeguarded against all those possible mishaps. But what the author is trying to suggest is, as a parent, when you look at kids taking some element of risk, the natural instinct as a parent is, you don't need to get hurt. Yeah, I want to ensure that you're safe, which is not wrong, nothing wrong in that feeling. But the problem is that when you try to overprotect, whether it's your kids or your team members, those who report into you, what you invariably tend to do is that you're doing a disservice to them because you're not allowing them to take risk which they need to. Because the world outside is not really safe. The world outside is not really a garden full of roses. It is perhaps a garden full of thorns. And therefore, it's important that people, whether they are kids or your team members, are capable enough, they are self-reliant enough to protect themselves against these problems. And that is where I think it's important to stop ourselves from overprotecting, because by doing that, you're robbing the kids of their ability to take calculated risk. And this is something which the author talks about time and again, is that you got to allow your kids some degree of freedom. So along with discipline, you got to give them some degree of freedom so that they're able to take these risks. And your job is to observe them from a distance. And if they do need you, maybe then you can intervene. But otherwise, step aside, let them take risks, let them prepare themselves physically, emotionally, mentally to face the challenges in the outside world. And the last rule, pet a cat when you encounter one in the street. I would bet you had no clue what this rule is about, because when I read it, I couldn't understand it the first time ever. I had to read it really deeply to understand it. What it means is, well, life is not easy, right? Life is not easy. Nothing new in that. Life has got so many problems, but it's human intellect which tends to expand these problems in our mind. We tend to feel life is a tragedy. Oh my God, I can't take care of this. So it's only human to exaggerate our problems. Not every time, but most of the times we tend to exaggerate our problems. And that's where the author says that you got to breathe easy. So when he says pet a cat, it means look at the brighter side of life. Look at things which are happening the right way around you. So connect to the basic things, connect with the smaller joys of life, whether it is petting a cat or looking at a rose blooming in a garden. All of these are simple joys of life, which will help you make sure that you do not exaggerate your tragedies as being the most difficult, the most miserable one. Because by doing that, again, you shift back into that victim mentality. You feel that life is helpless and it is worthless and there is nothing more to do. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people become victims of depression. So it's important that you look at the simple joys of life, smell your roses every now and then, because you need that. You need that to keep yourself mentally, physically, emotionally strong. So those are the 12 rules that Jordan Peterson has mentioned in his great book. Now, a bit more about who should read this book, right? Now, you might ask, is every book meant for me? So I believe not every book is meant for everyone. That's my take on it. You might have a different opinion about this. So I always look at reading the summary of a book before I choose whether I should read the entire book or not. But this book is definitely a big yes if you are looking forward to improving yourself as a human being, first of all. Of course, as a professional later, but more as a human being. If you're trying to help yourself, if you're trying to improvise your own personality, then I would definitely recommend this book to you. It is also a book which will make it uncomfortable for you at times, because it shows you some mirror. So it will make you uncomfortable, but I think that discomfort that you'll experience is only to help you become better. This book is a great book also for parents. As I said, there are certain rules which are for parenting, but even otherwise, this book will help you understand how do you perform the role of a parent, which I personally think and I've experienced is the most difficult role any person could play. It's also a decent book if you're a teacher or if you're a coach, so that you can instill and imbibe some of these elements in the people whom you associate with. And finally, if you're a leader, if you are someone who is a leader in the corporate world or not even in the corporate world, generally, if you're a leader, then you can surely read this book and recommend this book to other people as well. So meant for everyone. Now, if you're not amongst these 5 categories, you can still read this book, but these are people who must read this book. Okay. Very important, especially in connection to this particular book. How do you read this book? Now, you might say, I know how to read a book. Why are you telling me how do I read a book? Well, this book requires reading in a very different fashion. So I'm one of the old school philosophy thoughts that you shouldn't just breeze through a book. I could never understand the concept of speed reading. This book is anti-speed reading. You should not read this book at a space of 150 kilometers per hour. That is not what this book is meant for. Read one chapter at a time. Digest it, understand it, and only then move on to the next chapter. Perhaps when I was reading this book, I had to go back to certain ideas, certain paragraphs. I had to reread it because I couldn't understand it in the first case. Now, that doesn't mean I'm stupid, but the fact is you had to do some deep reading. There are so many examples that Jordan Peterson uses, which are from mythology, which are from medical science. So he's using different examples. Now, that's where you as a reader need to really increase your mental ability to grasp the subject knowledge. So don't go fast. Yeah, it's one of the recommendations I would strongly advise while you're reading this book. It is not meant for fast reading. One chapter at a time is what you would like to go for. Most importantly, pause and reflect. So once you read something, ask yourself, how does this apply to me? In what context is this going to make difference to me as an individual? So do that. You'll be able to get the maximum, optimum value out of this book. And of course, it's always a great thing to do. I try and do it all the time. Keep a highlighter so that you can mark important sections, so that you can go back to them whenever you want to. This is a book that you buy and then you keep it in your library and then you reopen it and read it again after some time. Okay, it's one of those books. So it's important that you highlight important sections just in case you want to reflect upon some of these insights later on. Some praise for the book. So I would say, for lack of space, I've just mentioned 3 of them, but a lot of people have recommended this book strongly because it is one of those books which can be life transforming. Once again, I would like to say it's not a very simple book to read. It takes time. It takes certain amount of commitment to read it, understand it, apply it, but it's a good book. So you must read 12 Rules for Life, as Chris Evans said, and then pass it on to a friend so that you can also help someone. It's an international blockbuster, is what New Yorker called it, and genuinely extraordinary, unmatched by any modern thinker, a prophet of our times, is what Dominic Sandbrook from Daily Mail quoted. So many other people who spoke highly about this book. So am I talking about this book. I think it's a wonderful literature piece that you must look forward to. And as I said, this book has the ability to transform your personality. Right. So I hope this book review has given you some insights and you're really excited now to read this book. So if you haven't, please go ahead, buy this copy and read it for yourself, and you can thank me later. Even if you don't thank me, that's all right. Thank yourself. Thank you so much for listening into today's discussion. I hope this has given you some insights. So please go ahead, pick up this book and do read it, and then share your thoughts, whether it helped you, whether it didn't help you. I'm sure it will help you. So thank you so much for being here today. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime very soon. Till then, take care of yourself and bye-bye for now.